The opening of the Bhagavad Gita, the sacred text of the Hindus, it takes place on a battlefield. Arjuna, the great warrior prince of the day, is the main character, and he is sitting there in utter despair, staring across the field of battle at his uncles, at his cousins, which he must go kill because they are fighting for a corrupted dynasty. And it is in this moment that his internal conflict rages to a crescendo. He's contemplating suicide, fleeing the field of battle, bringing shame to his family. And at the same exact time, he is asked to march into one of the mightiest conflicts of the ancient world. And it is in this storm, perhaps the mightiest storm one could imagine, that Krishna comes to him. Krishna, the incarnation of Vishnu, or the incarnation of the divine. And Krishna tells Arjuna something profound. He said, only in the heart of this violence can Arjuna carve a path to heaven. The battlefield is not a distraction from yoga. It is the initiation into it. To become a yogi, to reach apotheosis or the transcendent, Arjuna must burn through his cravings, through his aversions, through his sentimentality, through his fear, and essentially come into the path of heroic right action. Arjuna must learn to embody the transcendent over his lower nature. And this is what Evola calls the solar or the Olympian path of ancient spirituality. This Olympian and more ancient spirituality is far different. It's far loftier than the mindfulness of Eckhart Tolle, the watered-down Buddhism sold to us today, or the passivity of New Age religions. You see, Olympian spirituality is not about the peaceful monastery or living a lukewarm life of meditation or in, bourgeois society. It's not about mere moral living. These things can be okay, but Olympian spirituality, it unfolds specifically in the arena of life, on the hero's quest. It unfolds in tension, in conflict, in duty, and most importantly, in how you face the storms of life. To give you a quick example here, I just buried my grandpa, and he was one of the most joyous and outgoing men I ever knew. He had a heart of gold, but he wasn't always like that. In fact, he used to be an abusive alcoholic at one point, swirling in his own darkness, heavily depressed, addicted and just always drunk. But in one moment of severe tension and revelation in his life, with his kids and wife leaving him, he threw the bottle away and changed his entire personality forever. He became solar, loving, and transformed. In fact, it may have been the defining act of his life. All the other weaknesses and mistakes he made were nothing compared to this heroic moment where he became, the loving grandfather and father that we all knew him as. And this shows us something, right? This shows us that no one starts off transcendent. We all lack heroism at times, but transcendence is learned and then embodied during the Olympian tests in life. We all have them, right? And I tend to have them all the time, whether it's with sobriety, like massive life changes, chronic illness, severe pain of writing a book or something. Like all of these things can be hard. But one thing I've realized is that in order to find transcendence, in order to find the path of yoga, the path of Christ, the path of God, right? We need massive amounts of opposition, or else you have nothing to transcend over. Transcendence is about liberation, going beyond, overcoming. It's about bringing the divine into your body and into your life. And in order to do this on the Olympian path, one must place oneself into the greatest of tensions possible, the greatest of tensions you are capable of dealing with right now, and then win. And obviously, this is the ideal that defined ancient Greece and most of ancient Europe, like the Nordics. So the Olympian ideal comes from the Greek world, and it's seen in all of their stories, their myths, their Olympic games. This idea that struggle for transcendence, this is the ideal. You see, when Heracles was fighting the Hydra of addiction, as my friend calls it, every single head he cut off, 2 more would grow. It almost overwhelmed him. Heracles started off heroic, unstoppable, but he fought and fought until exhaustion. His spirit quivered. He felt hopeless. His strength was overcome. He was probably feeling like Arjuna on that battlefield, ready to commit suicide or flee. And right there, that's when most men lose, right? but not Heracles. In his darkest hour, he found hope and transcendence, and he changed. He sought out the aid of his cousin to cauterize the wounds after he dealt them. And in one last heroic attempt, Heracles slayed the Hydra in his own soul. He subdued his lizard brain, the monster of cravings and aversions, and rose to Olympian heights. Heracles became a god. This is the fundamental story behind all great men and heroes of ancient Greece and the world of tradition. Those who are loved by the gods will live lives full of intensity. Many of you will relate to this. Your lives feel blessed and cursed in the highest. Good. You see, intensity is the first requirement for self-actualization. In fact, intensity is probably the only thing all geniuses and great men share in their life, is that they live their lives with intensity. And it is only heat that forces some men to adapt. It is only heat that forces some men to become something more. And yes, obviously this idea of heat, of danger, of the impossible labors, this is dangerous. Not all succeed. In fact, most men of daemon and strong desire kill themselves slowly or quickly because they fail to become yogis. And men driven by aversion or avoidance, the other side of the coin, the type B people, they tend to waste their lives if they don't become yogis. I've made dozens of videos about this, and the fact that most people either have a really strong daemon here, this will to power, this fire inside of you, these desires that rule you and temptations that crush you, or you have a lot of avoidance in your soul. And these two things, avoidance, craving, daemon, and surrender, these two things, when mastered, lead you to the pinnacle. But without mastering them, it just leads you to entropy. And essentially, we live in a world of radical entropy today, where cravings, aversions, weaknesses, fears, sentimentality, all of these lower things in the subterranean world are pulling everyone away from the center of transcendence. And this is the entire philosophy in the Bhagavad Gita, is the idea of dharma, of this transcendent center within man. And the entire path of yoga, the entire path of, ancient Olympian spirituality is to come into that transcendent core at the middle of you and bring it into the world through action, through all the heat of life. And in fact, to use all the entropy, to use the cravings, the aversions, the temptation, to use all of it to actually anchor you deeper into your place of power. This is the path of the Olympian. So I want to leave you after that inspired rant with my paraphrasing of Arjuna, of Krishna here. And he says, free of ego, free of cravings and avoidance, with your mind full of devotion, fight. Now, let's talk about actually embodying this, because I think we can have these lofty ideals of transcendence. We can watch a video like this, but then the moment that the craving strikes to go eat some sugar or smoke a cigarette, or the anxiety builds when, you're in a relationship of some kind, or the resistance hits to doing your work, it's really hard to embody transcendence in those moments. So what do we do from here, right? So just last night, before I wrote this script, which is a couple of days ago, I couldn't fall asleep till 5 a.m., as often happens to me with chronic insomnia. And I almost gave up there. My body just hurts so much. It's been 3 weeks of chronic insomnia, and that's a very common cycle for me. And this insomnia blocks me from most joys in life. And it can feel so disheartening to aspire to these lofty ideals, to have tremendous light in my soul, but every single day for weeks at a time, I get cut down. And fatigue is constant. Suffering is my morning coffee. And I don't mean to just talk too much about myself, but I just got to be real with you about my battles. And I look at the past 5 years here of my life, right? Where I've written a book that took me 2 years to write. I built successful YouTube channels and businesses. We're launching an app right now. I've won a heroic war over the worst addiction that almost killed me. Isolation, heartbreak, and I did all of this feeling exhausted 90% of the time. And to be real with you, life has mostly felt like war for me. It's probably the main catalyst behind all this content on Wisdom Warriors, is that my life usually feels hard. And it's why I write you a letter now about transcendence. You see, I'm healing. I'm healing through the help of Qigong, of retraining my nervous system, virtue, and honestly, creating this intimate relationship with transcendence that I feel in and through my body. You see, in the past, that week of insomnia, I hate pain. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to go into masochism or suffering. But when it did arrive, I found myself riding it with a smile and actually using that pain to deepen my meditation practice, right? And this is kind of the method. If you take away a code from this video, like a mantra, is that Olympians channel fire upwards. In fact, my core thesis I've hit on 1,000 times on this channel is that the vast majority of spiritual and creative growth comes from heat, how you use heat. For instance, temptation towards a substance. If you get deep enough into where that is coming from, you realize that it's actually a deeper desire for God, right? This is why addicts become priests if they go through the path of yoga. Olympians channel fire upwards, and the greatest source of heat for you is wherever your dragon resides, okay? So everyone has a little bit of a different dragon per se. Some of you lean more towards craving and the daemon. You're desire driven. Some of you are more lean towards aversion, avoidance. You're more type B. You're resistance driven, aversion driven, right? So you have to understand the nature of your own beast. The dragon for me, as I've spoken of before, is usually dissatisfaction with the mundane, mixed with extremely productive urges, like this restlessness that when I wake up, I want to go conquer frontiers, build stuff. But at the same time, sometimes I'm really lazy, unproductive, right? And that is combined with the capacity to rationalize any and all temptations and shortcuts. This has been dangerous, very dangerous. It led me into a lot of pain in my life, like many, many years of addiction, of loneliness, of, desperation, of building things like frantically. Oh my God, I've been a very broken soul in my life. But your dragon is different than mine, It might be lust. It might be anger, depression, suicidal ideation. Maybe it's fear, hyper avoidance. Maybe your dragon is more external in character. Maybe you struggle a lot with money or relationships, sex, chronic illness, loss. There's so many things that haunt human beings. And what is up to you is to identify your battlefield and your dragon. The more clear in that self-knowledge you can become, the more clear on the main source of heat in your life. And the entire solar Olympian path is grabbing that source of heat and constantly wrestling with it until you find the strategy of channeling it up Jacob's ladder towards God, right? This is the path, right? It's intentionally facing sources of heat, understanding that beast in your own soul and using it for growth, transmuting it, right? To give you an example of this, like I love stories of warriors meditating on death before battle. I love the story of Musashi, these great samurais of Japan. They lived lives full of heat. Like imagine walking into your 60th duel to the death. Like how much fear you would have to have overcome before that. How much self-mastery that duel would have demanded for you. If you have ever trained for a fight in your life, think about how having that event demands utter self-mastery and excellence of you. Heat demanding transcendence. It's the same thing with the warrior monks, the authentic warrior monks like Akarya Mun. I think I said his name right. He enjoyed meditating in tiger-infested wildernesses. He went to the most haunted cave in India and he sat there and he's like, I'm going to overcome the ghost of this cave, right? Because he understands something. He understood that fear sharpened his spirit. It demanded transcendence in his mind over an obstacle. And I bet these monks made more progress than the lukewarm souls ever did. And this is a very similar phenomena to when I meditate, when I'm feeling high amounts of anxiety, fatigue, stress. It's like my meditations are better the harder my life is, which is wild. And like where else do you see like Eckhart Tolle or the New Age spiritual teachers, or even like your religious pastors talking about this? No one talks about this because we have lost like the solar warrior priest tradition. But I would say like this tradition is the most direct path for a lot of men here. So heat awakens the soul when channeled. But like one nuance here is you must choose the right amount of heat. For most of us, like too much temptation, too much fear would be our ruin right now. I don't think most of you would handle like a super, cute, sexy, seductress woman, a siren walking by you right now, right? So we must build our capacity towards Herculean feats, like Herculean levels. So I'm going to skip over these couple examples I have here of addiction, temptation, and insomnia, main sources of heat for me. But the thing to note for you is like, where do you face a battle in your life? And how can you reframe your perspective on that battle as the means of creating more inner freedom, deeper surrender, and more transcendence inside? So let's get into the framework of how we actually apply all of this now. And that starts at what is transcendence. We've been circling this point the whole video so far, but the only thing I want to say here is that transcendence, there's this domain, this world of being, the transcendent domain per se. And the more that we attune to this world through prayer, through heroic action, through meditation, we create this felt sense with something that is superior to all that we face down here. And this is why prayer, meditation, these things are very, very important. So that when you do get into hard situations of your life, when the storms come, you're anchored or can anchor yourself in something higher. So the path for the Olympian is twofold. It is going through the heat of life, addressing heat directly, and also while you're in heat of life, creating transcendence. And this is where I want to say that like this transcendent domain, it happens in and through your body. Transcendence is physical and spiritual. So let me explain this. Is the long-term victory of transcendence is in the great opening of your nervous system, right? The difference between a moment of enlightenment on mushrooms or a higher stage of spiritual development is literally your nervous system. Some people have these experiences of going beyond, but then they come right back to where they are. I've had thousands of mystical experiences in my life, thousands of heroic moments, right? And I've almost become disillusioned with them because it's more of a state of consciousness versus a higher stage of consciousness. What we want to focus on the Olympian path is reaching a higher stage of development. And this looks at creating a spiritual physical practice. A spiritual physical practice is supreme, right? For instance, like when you're in the heat of anger, anxiety, suffering, like these transcendent ideas mean nothing. What you need is some way to actually transmute that energy upwards, right? And to give you a quick example, like dance and martial arts are amazing for this. I was at this huge dance event yesterday for 5 hours. And if you ever dance for 2, 3, 4 hours straight, you go through all of these different things in your head, but you suddenly find that you can be joyful and powerful through anything. And it's like, it helps create this feeling of transcendence. Same thing with martial arts, the Temple of Iron. When these physical acts are done with a sacred intention, something profound happens, right? So this is one reason that I think, in the academy that we have online and the academy town that I want to build one day, I think meditation, martial arts, and dance or music should be required curriculum every single year for everyone. Like, imagine being surrounded by people who can dance, who can meditate, and who can do martial arts, and like exercise every day. Those people would be fully expressed, but also their training grounds would always be directing them back towards transcendence. And I don't think most people are strong enough to overcome a lot of these weaknesses in our nature without these established practices and disciplines. Among them, meditation is absolutely king. Because what meditation does is it orients us to building a relationship with the higher world. Nothing can happen without the transcendent initiation, right? So to give an example to you briefly is just the other day, actually, when I was writing this script, I had this love affair going on in my life. And when I was leaving the cafe and it said goodbye to this lady, I saw 2 good-looking men sit down and immediately start chatting her up. And of course, like my stomach just dropped, instant anxiety. I do have a little bit of like tendencies towards anxiety, anxious attachment, things like that. If you know the feeling, this feeling freaking sucks, right? So I walked home, I finished my work, the anxiety wouldn't go away. But instead of texting her or something, or dwelling in my anxiety, or letting it build in some way, like I did my Qigong meditation practice. And Qigong simply means like energy cultivation. It's a style of meditation I find super like direct results and something easy to stick with. And I'll talk to you about how to do this meditation at the end. In fact, I actually teach a meditation style every single Monday in the Men's Academy. There's a link below if you do want to talk to me about the Men's Academy. Come join this academy mission that we're on. I would love to have you if you're a brother out there. But essentially, I sat there and I focused deeply on aligning my posture in my body and in my mind. And then as you're aligning your structure, right, I'm just relaxing everything into gentle excellence. In meditation in general, what you do want to focus on is posture in body and mind, and then a connection to something higher. And as you're holding this in your mind and constantly returning to this, what you're doing is practicing gentle excellence. You're restructuring the body and actually transmuting, base energies upwards. And after literally 30 minutes into that, I ended up in a state of transcendent peace, like victorious peace, right? Where the anxiety actually became a lot of energy. And in that, like, I awakened to the true goal. I awakened, to the kingdom of God that is all around us. And I say this because it is only in that state of realization, of vision, that I could see like cravings, fears, and aversions for what they are, like inferior to the power of my spirit. A lot of the time, like, I'm walking through life ruled by these things, and like, you can't fight them directly. If you know when temptation is upon you, when anxiety is upon you, when depression is upon you, you can't like just wrestle with that in your mind. You need some kind of practice that brings you beyond it and lets you conquer it. This is what it means to become like a sacred king, right? Is to become a yogi, someone who is connected and living from the transcendent domain, where he can vanquish the darkness inside of himself and inside of his kingdom constantly. Like the sun rising across the kingdom, it's vanquishing all the shadows. But that can only happen because the sun is the symbol of light pouring forth from God, pouring forth from the transcendent domain. It's the guiding symbol of the Olympian path. So I talked briefly about the practice here, and I actually want to give you just a framework for doing it in your own life. So the 4-step Olympian practice, this framework really works if you apply it to your life. And the first step is know your battlefield. If you don't recognize and name your dragons, your demons, you will always lose to them, right? What things constantly lead to pain and suffering in your life? Where are you weak in your life? And where's your main struggle point? Could be relationships, work, pain, getting out of bed in the morning. And like, we have to look at this as the battlefield in which we learn yoga. That is the battlefield in which you learn yoga. And the first thing in that path is we must have a meditation practice that connects us to transcendence and energy cultivation. So when it comes to meditation, it's very hard to teach this online, let alone in person. But if you're going to take away anything from this video, start at posture. This is what so much of the mindfulness bullshit and like new age teachings miss. It's just like this dabbling in all these different things without actually rebuilding energetic structure. So meditation for me, I do it 20 minutes twice a day. And the first thing I do is I align my spine as if someone is pulling up on a thread, behind my head. And as my spine elongates, I have to constantly bring myself back to proper posture and then relaxing everything. If you look at a map of the human body, everything is hanging off of the spine, the shoulders, the organs, the diaphragm, the nervous system. And what you want to do is align the back, align the spine, and then relax everything else. This is hard to do. Every other breath or so, you're going to notice your diaphragm clenching back up, maybe tension in parts of your body, your spine wanting to cave in. This is where you actually rebuild the subtle energetic anatomy, which my next video will be about. If you want to see that, comment below. But you're constantly returning to posture and then relaxation. And this will bring your mind to a much deeper place of one-pointedness. From this place of one-pointedness, right? What we do is we start meditating on the ideal. This is the second thing that a lot of the mindfulness practices miss, is they don't have a transcendent ideal. Whether you pray to Christ, to Krishna, to your higher self, it doesn't matter as long as you have devotion. And this is not an external ideal that you're praying to. What does it feel like to embody the body of Christ, the body of Krishna? It feels like gentle excellence, like lightness, like this field of transcendence. These are why these figures are so important, because they set the ideal in which to meditate upon. And as you hold that in your mind and you hold your body in correct structure, what you're going to notice is tension in your body and deviations in your mind. All of a sudden you'll find that transcendent point, and then cravings will arise, or aversions, or whatever, right? And it's like constantly just allowing non-resistance, non-attachment, an attitude of loving awareness and transcendence. And the more that you can tap into the yogic state, the more two things become apparent to you. And that is energy cultivation and what the transcendent is. Now, again, I teach this style of meditation every single Monday in the Men's Academy. There's a link below. Seriously, come join us, my friends. Would love to have you. So this is step 3 in the process. As we get clear on the battlefield, we start doing a meditation practice every day for just 20 minutes every morning. The third step is, as you go through life, become super aware of cravings and aversions. These all come from your animalistic nature. One of my favorite quotes is from the Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And it says that when you don't get what you want, you suffer. When you get something that you don't want, you suffer. And when you get exactly what you want, you suffer because you're scared of losing it. The mind is its own universe of cravings, desires, aversion to bad experience, desire for these positive experiences. And this overlay in our minds is dictating our entire relationship and pattern in life. And if we want to become free, if we want to become yogis, we must conquer the egoic mind. This is why Buddhism, yoga, these Eastern traditions are so honed in on cravings and aversions as the deepest driving forces of suffering. Both of these come from attachment, right? So your path through your battlefield is about creating this energetic sense of transcendence, learning to cultivate energy in your body. And as you move forward then into action is to notice and overcome these two things. And holy moly, cravings and aversions, they are so strong when we get into the battlefield, right? If you're just going through the motions of life, living a lukewarm life, numbing yourself with, Netflix and pornography and vapes and bad relationships, life is just kind of right here. What we actually want to do is take that hero's quest into intensity, because you will never actually have to face the cravings and aversions until you get on the battlefield. When you're in the arena of leaving the love of your life, conquering an addiction, starting a business, taking your grand adventure into the unknown, these things, this debris in your mind gets whipped up into a freaking tornado. This is where Olympians are born. Meditation, yoga is about cutting through the debris in your own mind. But we need to prepare ourselves for this through these things like meditation, and virtue. And ultimately, step 4, the thing that we can aim to do after, meditation is try to act in virtue. This is the ideal put forth by Evola, put forth by the yogis, put forth by the European tradition, and that is of the warrior priest, right? The man that is exceptionally skilled in the physical world can take heroic action, build businesses, conquer frontiers, but does so in utter devotion to a higher principle. This man is free. He is liberated. He is transcendent. And to get here, we need to understand what virtue is. I've hated the idea of virtue most of my life. I've lived the vast majority of my life with little virtue. But I'm at this point where I realize that anything that deviates from the path of virtue just depletes my energy in the long run. And if I actually want to approach this ideal that I'm putting forth in this video, I need to increase my virtue 1% every single day. And what that means is acting from the transcendent world. To give one final example that's a little different than my others here, is just last week, I was laying on the floor, scrolling on my phone, feeling so unmotivated, inert, exhausted. I was recovering from, a couple weeks of hard work. And there was simply no heat to be found. I didn't want to do anything. It was the second day of this. But in my soul, beneath the pleasure seeking, the cravings for the phone, I have set the intention for myself to write a fiction book. And I love writing fiction. It is just so hard to sit my ass down and get back into the story. So writing fiction in that moment felt so heroic to me. But what I did is I actually just plopped myself into the chair in front of my computer and started meditating on the transcendent. And then the little bit, the most faint whisper in my heart was just oh, write about this. And this overcoming, this transcendent experience, it didn't start as harsh warrior energy. It felt actually kind of just a surrender into my duty. And when I did that, I ended up writing till 9:30 p.m. I felt Olympian. I was with the gods. I had won under hard circumstances, and I didn't win by force. I won by transcendence. And this is my prayer for you. May we embody that warrior priest energy with joy, my friends, and bring it into our lives and bring it back into the world. This is how we restore a higher culture of Dharma, a higher culture of transcendence. If you want to go deeper into this thought and into this idea, this is one of my favorite videos I've ever made on why restless souls become spiritual masters. This is about the temptation and channeling the fires of life. And if you want to work with me one-on-one, join the academy and build something incredible with our lives. Link below to do that. Let's go, my friends.